You're watching Adam the Bull on the BetRivers Network.
Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by BetRivers. Lot to get to on today's podcast. But first, I want to talk to you about BetRivers and the app. If you're not betting using the BetRivers app or website, you're missing out. There's some great opportunities on there. You can bet on anything you want. Futures, point spreads, over-unders, anything. Total bases. Right now, there's a lot of good baseball stuff. We do a lot of stuff with tennis and soccer and a whole lot more. So check out the BetRivers app. Also, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already and give us a thumbs up. So I was thinking about this, and I talked a little bit about it earlier today, but I wanted to dive more into what a great time this is to be a Cleveland sports fan. We were talking about, I mentioned earlier today, I was like, I can't remember if the three Cleveland teams had ever been in the playoffs in the same year, because the Browns made the playoffs. Technically, it was the 2023 season, but they played in the playoffs in 2024. The Cavs obviously did, and the Guardians are well on their way. And I was thinking it was the first time that it's ever happened, but actually that's not the case. It happened one other time, once. So this would be the second time in the history of the three teams that all three made the playoffs. The other time was 1995. 1995, of course, the Browns made the playoffs. That was the 94 season. They did not make the playoffs in the 1995 season, of course. But in the 94 season, they made their last trip to the playoffs before the team was stolen. And they played those games, of course, in 1995. Then in the spring/summer of 1995, the Cavs made the playoffs. They made it only to the first round, won 43 games behind Mike Fratello that year in the 94-95 season. And, of course, that was the year that at the time, of course, the Indians ended their over 40-year drought of not making the postseason, as they made the playoffs for the first time. They would have made it likely in 94, but the strike ended that season. And then they went, of course, not only making the playoffs for the first time in 40 years, but they went all the way to the World Series. Unfortunately, they lost. But so all three teams made it to the playoffs in 1995. Now, technically, I guess it depends how you look at it. Technically, you could argue all three teams didn't make it, because it was really the 94 Browns season, and then the 95 Browns season, they didn't go to the playoffs, of course. So we've never had that yet, but we wouldn't have it here anyway, because technically it's the Browns' 23 season with the 24 playoffs. But if the Guardians do make the playoffs, which seems highly likely at this point, then it would only be the second time ever that all three teams made it. First time in almost 30 years. And it would leave open the possibility to, the possibility of going around again if the Browns made the playoffs in technically the 24 season, as opposed to just the 24 playoffs. But it is what it is. It still would be the second time that all three teams made it in the same year. And, I was thinking today about, is this the best time ever to be a Cleveland sports fan? Now, in 2016, of course, the Indians went to the World Series, lost the heartbreaker. The Cavs won a championship. The Browns were terrible. And so even though it was the best combined run there by two teams, the third team was terrible. So you could say the highs of the high are higher than now, but this is the first time you've had all three since 95. And in 95, of course, soon after all three teams made the playoffs, you found out that the Browns were being stolen from Cleveland. So the good times didn't last very long. The Browns then, at least, didn't last very long for the Browns, and it was devastating, obviously, to the whole area when a team was stolen out of town. The Cavs, soon after making the playoffs in 95, became a pretty bad team for a while leading up to the LeBron coming to Cleveland, but the Cavs didn't win a playoff series after, including that 94-95 season until a decade later with LeBron. So it wasn't the start of something special there or in with the Browns. Now, for the Guardians, the Indians, it was the start of some 95 or really 94 was the start of something special. It was a great time. You know, I would say most Indians/Guardians fans would say that was probably the best time ever to be an Indians fan was the mid 90s into the early 2000s. There's been a lot of good times to be an Indians/Guardians fan from then on, but that was the best stretch. I think most people would say that. But if you look at where all three franchises are right now, the Cavaliers have made the playoffs 2 years in a row. They appear at the moment, in my mind, the least likely to win a championship over the next few years, but it's not impossible. They have won 99 games the last 2 years. The Browns are in the best position they've been in for a very long time. Now, obviously, there's a lot of questions that we've talked about ad nauseum about Deshaun Watson, but still, the roster's excellent. And if Deshaun Watson can get himself right, this team could be special and could be a Super Bowl champion. There's no doubt about it. The Browns in the last 5 years, in the 4 years under Kevin Stefanski, have won 37 games, 38 including the playoffs. Obviously, it's the best stretch of Browns football since the 80s. So the Browns are in better shape than they've been in a long time. The Cavs, you can't say it's the best shape they've been in a long time because they had LeBron, they won a championship, but they're in good shape. And same thing for the Guardians. I mean, right now the Guardians are in good shape. They're playing great. There's every reason to believe they'll continue to be good here for a while. It's not as good as what it was in the 90s, and I don't think it's going to be. Even the last generation, if you will, of the mid-2000s teams, 2010s teams where they went to the World Series and had some really good teams there, 16, 17. I can't even put it up with there yet because they didn't make the playoffs last year. The year before they did. They got some good young players I like, but it's a highly positive time for Indians/Guardians baseball. One of the best times in the certainly since the early 2000s. It's really fun right now to be a Guardians fan. So all three teams are in a good place, and all three teams have a future that looks at least somewhat promising. It doesn't feel like any of them are coming to the end of the road. Now, you never know. The Indians really haven't been, after being consistently hideous from the mid-50s to the mid-90s, they've been consistently good for a long time now. And since I've been covering the team in 2011, I mean, it's been not many years where they haven't been at least competitive. So I think it is a great time to be a Cleveland sports fan. You'd have to decide individually if it's the best time. I think in the end, I would say 2016 and it was as good as it gets because you had two teams playing for championship and one that won. And unless you're a fan who is in their 80s, you haven't seen any of the championships. So that would be the best. But to have all three teams good at the same time, to likely have all three teams make the playoffs for just the second time in the history of the city, to have a reasonable chance that we could see all three teams make the playoffs 2 years in a row is pretty exciting. And in fact, 4 of the last 5 seasons, we've had a team make the playoffs, right? Or 3 of the last 4. You had the 23-24 Cavs made the playoffs. Then the 24 Guardians did not. Then the 24, I'm sorry. The 22-23 Cavs made the playoffs. Then the 23 Guardians did not. The 23-24 Browns did. The 23-24 Cavs did, and now it looks like the 24 Guardians will, which will be 4 out of 5 if the Guardians make it, and you certainly have a chance to keep that run going. To consistently have your teams making the playoffs is an exciting time, and that's something that's never really happened here. To have all three teams be able to consistently make the playoffs, and if the Guardians can make the playoffs the next 2 years, the Cavs next year, and the Browns this coming season, then you could do 2 years in a row, which obviously has never been done here in Cleveland. It is remarkable that in all these years of sports, that this would only be the second time ever that it's happened. But it is what it is. But I think overall, and you think about Jose Ramirez signing a contract extension in Cleveland, your best player signs at a major discounted rate. Myles Garrett looks to be locked up here to maybe the end of his career. Nick Chubb, they figured his contract situation out. And then, of course, the big news for the Cavaliers that just happened yesterday. Donovan Mitchell signed a 3-year extension, 2 years and a player option for the third year on top of the 1 year he still got left under contract with the Cavs. So the Cavs technically have team control of Donovan Mitchell for 3 more years. Now, we know that if after this next season Donovan Mitchell wants to get traded, he'll get traded. But there's not the pressure of him leaving in free agency in a year, and you feel like, well, if we're not good enough, we may have to trade him. That's out the window right now. Now it's all about building around him. So the fact that Myles Garrett chose to sign an extension here, that Jose Ramirez at a major discount signed an extension here, and that Donovan Mitchell, who everybody, myself included, thought was going to leave, either get traded this offseason or leave as a free agent, every national media member that covers the NBA was 100% certain he's going to go to the Knicks. He's going to go to this team, that team. Even recently, guys like Kendrick Perkins, not really insiders or authority, but it was like, oh, he's played his last game for the Cavs. And no, Donovan Mitchell consistently said he wanted to stay in Cleveland. Things changed in New York, obviously, when Jalen Brunson went from being good player to star. It changed the dynamic there. And now Donovan Mitchell looked at the situation and said, I got a great situation in Cleveland, at least for now. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to get paid a lot of money, even though he took a discount. But he chose Cleveland. And that's guys are actually choosing Cleveland. For years, it felt like nobody wanted to play in Cleveland. I don't. First of all, in football, it's all about money. And the Browns were a joke of an organization. I don't think it was that people didn't want to play in Cleveland necessarily. I think it's the Browns were a joke. You don't want to play for a team like that. I think with the Indians/Guardians, it's always been about the money. Certainly in the last 30 years, the organization's been one of the better organizations in the league for 30 years. And so I don't think there's been people who didn't want to play here because of Cleveland. I think this team didn't spend enough money. I think it's just, and now in the NBA, it's different. Guys want to be in sexy markets, but that's not a Cleveland thing specifically. I mean, Milwaukee and Detroit, guys, those are not desirable targets for young men. Whatever. They have different priorities. For me, as a 50-year-old living in Cleveland, I love it here. When I first was offered a job in Cleveland, I took it because it was a job. I wasn't excited to move to Cleveland. I'd never been to Cleveland. I knew nothing about Cleveland. The same dopey things you hear comedians say. That's all I knew. I didn't know anybody from here. And 13 years later, about to celebrate my 13th anniversary in Cleveland, I think it's a great place. And I think, and there's very little that I miss from New York. I wouldn't want to move back to New York, honestly. I've said that quite often in recent years. When I first moved to Cleveland for the first couple of years, my goal was to get back working in New York, but that changed a while ago. I over the years I've been less and less interested in moving back to New York to the point where the last few years I no longer have any desire to move there. And that was never really going to New York itself as if it was a better city. It was just more about my career, but I just don't have any interest anymore in doing that. And so for me, there's a lot of great things about Cleveland. Most especially, it's easy to get around. You don't have to sit in bad traffic. That's a game changer for life. It really is. I used to have terrible commutes into New Jersey. And people that live in the big cities, you waste hours of your life commuting. I hate that. It's terrible. I didn't want that. So anyway, I think it's a great time to be a Cleveland sports fan, and it's exciting that Donovan Mitchell has re-signed with the Cavaliers, and now they got to find what to do around him because we know the Knicks have gotten better. We know Boston's the defending champs. We know Milwaukee with a healthy Giannis is going to be good. We know Philadelphia with a healthy Joel Embiid is going to be good. Orlando's a team on the rise. So the East is tough. I don't think the Cavs are at the top. I don't think anybody thinks the Cavs are at the top. But can they compete with the top teams? It depends what they do. Do they trade Jarrett Allen? I've talked about this. I think the best way forward is probably just finding out how good Evan Mobley and Darius Garland can be with a new coach. If there is the right deal for Jarrett Allen, so be it. Get it done. And then, getting the best out of the guys you haven't been able to reach that level that you think they can, and then putting the right pieces around these four guys. That's probably going to be the answer here. Guardians won again yesterday after a day off and a bad series against Kansas City. They beat the White Sox 7-6 on a walk-off sac fly by Bo Naylor. Very excited about Gavin Williams making his 2024 debut tonight. And so I'm looking forward to watching that game, see how he looks. I like the over on his strikeouts today. I think it's only 3.5. He'll probably be on a pretty strict pitch count. I wouldn't be surprised if he only went 3-4 innings, but I'd still take over a 3.5 on the strikeouts. All right, folks, thanks to everybody for joining me today. Please hit the like. Please hit the thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button. Thanks to Max for producing. Talk to you next time. Everybody have a great 4th of July. Next podcast on Monday. No live show on the 4th of July. Love you all. Talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. Brought to you by BetRivers. See ya.